The knock wasn't a knock at all. It was a slam. The wooden door of the quiet lake cabin rattled so hard it nearly jumped off its hinges. Inside, the room went silent, the crackling fire in the stone fireplace, the only sound breaking the tension. The protagonist froze mid-sentence. His guest, none other than the state attorney general, glancing up sharply with a mixture of confusion and irritation, and then came the voice, shrill, demanding, the kind of voice that could slice through calm like a jagged knife. "Open up! I know you're in there, and you can't just hide from HOA rules." It was Karen, the same HOA board member who had made his life a circus ever since he bought the lake property, a place that, according to the deeds and county records, didn't even fall under HOA jurisdiction. But that detail had never stopped Karen before. The protagonist's heart thumped, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of the timing, because on this night, in this very cabin, he wasn't alone. He was meeting the one person Karen would never dare to challenge, at least not knowingly. He exchanged a glance with the Attorney General, who leaned back in the chair, raising an eyebrow as though silently asking, "Do you want me to handle this?" But Karen didn't wait. Without permission, without hesitation, she stormed in, shoving the cabin door wide open as if she owned the place. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor, her eyes darting around the room like a hawk, searching for prey. Her gaze locked on the protagonist, but then flickered to the well-dressed guest sitting across from him. Confusion furrowed her brow, but arrogance pushed her voice louder. This meeting is unauthorized. HOA rules clearly state no outside business can be conducted on community property without board approval. And as board secretary, I demand you leave, both of you." The Attorney General leaned forward, calm but cutting, his eyes fixed on Karen with the kind of authority that didn't need to be announced. Karen hadn't realized yet, not who she was speaking to, not the weight of the situation, not the irony of barging in to enforce rules that had no power here. But the next words out of the Attorney General's mouth would freeze her in place, and the cabin, once filled with firelight warmth, was about to become the stage for a showdown Karen never saw coming. What the Attorney General said next left Karen speechless, and set in motion a chain of events that would shake the entire HOA to its core. If you love seeing HOA Karens get what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next twist will leave you speechless. Karen stood in the center of the cabin, her hands on her hips, her sharp gaze bouncing between the protagonist and his guest. The air inside seemed to thicken, the warmth of the fireplace no longer comforting, but instead amplifying the tension that now filled the room. She had stormed in like a conqueror, convinced she was about to enforce another one of her self-invented HOA decrees. For months, she had treated the lake community as her personal kingdom, rewriting rules, misquoting regulations, and intimidating neighbors into silence. But tonight she had no idea what she was stepping into. The Attorney General slowly rose from his chair. He wasn't a tall man by comparison, but the sheer weight of his presence filled the space. His eyes locked on Karen with a mixture of calm authority and quiet disapproval, like a teacher watching a child throw a tantrum in class. Karen blinked, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face, but her pride pushed her forward. "I don't know who you think you are," she snapped, her voice dripping with indignation, "but this cabin falls under HOA jurisdiction. That means I get the final say on what kind of meetings are allowed here, and trust me, this one is not allowed." The protagonist almost pitied her in that moment. Almost, the Attorney General's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile, the kind that wasn't born of amusement but of irony. He tilted his head slightly and asked in a low, deliberate tone, "HOA jurisdiction, you say, over this cabin?" Karen folded her arms tighter across her chest. "Yes, it's right there in the bylaws. Any property on the lake is subject to review and approval of the Homeowners Association, and as board secretary, I have the authority to intervene when rules are being broken." The Attorney General exchanged a knowing glance with the protagonist before pulling a slim leather folder from his briefcase. He flipped it open, revealing stamped documents, official seals gleaming under the cabin's lamplight. Karen's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to be? Official county records?" The Attorney General replied coolly, "Deeds, maps, jurisdictional boundaries, and unless I'm misreading, which I assure you I am not, this cabin sits entirely outside of your HOA authority." For the first time, Karen's confidence wavered. She shifted her weight, her eyes darting back and forth between the documents and the two men standing before her. But Karen wasn't one to retreat gracefully. "That doesn't matter," she barked, her voice rising with forced authority. "You can't just come into our community and start, whatever this is, meetings, business deals, conspiracies, whatever you're plotting. I will take this to the board, and you'll regret it." The Attorney General's eyes narrowed. His voice remained steady, but it carried a sharp edge now, the kind that made every syllable land with undeniable weight. "Karen," he said firmly, "do you even know who I am?" Her jaw clenched. "Some lawyer, some consultant, doesn't matter. The rules apply to everyone." The room fell silent for a beat. The protagonist leaned back, watching, almost amazed at Karen's ability to double down in the face of obvious authority. She had walked into this cabin believing she was the most powerful person in the room. But she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The Attorney General reached into his pocket, pulled out a card, and placed it gently on the table between them. The gold, embossed lettering caught the firelight, making the words unmistakable. Karen leaned forward, squinting at the card, and then her face paled. The title printed beneath his name left no room for doubt. For once, Karen's voice faltered. You're. Her words trailed off, her usual arrogance colliding with the reality of who stood in front of her. The protagonist's lips twitched into the faintest smile. It was the first time he had ever seen Karen speechless. But the silence didn't last long. Because if there was one thing Karen couldn't stand, it was losing control. And she was about to make a decision that would drag the entire neighborhood into a conflict far bigger than anyone had anticipated. Karen had finally realized who she was up against. But instead of backing down, she was about to escalate the fight in a way that would shock the entire community. The silence in the cabin hung like a heavy curtain. For once, Karen wasn't the loudest voice in the room. Her eyes stayed fixed on the Attorney General's business card, as if the gold letters themselves mocked her arrogance. The protagonist could almost see the gears turning in her head, pride wrestling with fear, indignation clawing at reason. But then, as if fueled by pure stubbornness, Karen straightened her back and forced a brittle laugh. "So, the Attorney General," she said, her voice a shade too loud, "well, I don't care if you're the governor, the president, or the King of England. HOA rules apply to everyone. You think you're above the law. Think again." The protagonist nearly choked on his own breath. It was astounding, Karen's ability to twist reality in her favor, no matter how impossible it seemed. She hadn't come this far by admitting fault, and she certainly wasn't going to start now. The Attorney General studied her, not with anger, but with a curious calm, as though he were observing a case study in entitlement. Finally, he spoke, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "Karen, I am the law in this state, and I assure you, your HOA rules hold no authority over this cabin or over me." But Karen wasn't listening. She was already spinning, already building a narrative where she wasn't the villain, but the hero. She pointed toward the protagonist, her eyes blazing. "This man, this outsider, thinks he can buy a lake property and ignore community standards. He thinks because he's got money, he can throw it around, build what he wants, meet with whoever he wants, and destroy the peace of our neighborhood." Her words pierced the air, hot and shrill. But beneath the surface, the protagonist saw something new, desperation. Karen was losing grip, and she knew it. Still, she pressed forward. You think this cabin is safe from oversight? I'll have the board vote on new bylaws by next week. Retroactive ones if I have to. I'll get the entire community behind me, and when I do, you'll wish you never bought this place." The Attorney General let her rant, his arms folded across his chest, waiting for her tirade to burn itself out. When she finally paused to catch her breath, he stepped closer, his words slicing through her bluster. "Do you realize what you're threatening?" he asked. "You're talking about abuse of power, falsifying rules, harassment of a homeowner. Do you want to know what we call that where I sit? Illegal." Karen's face twitched. Her confidence cracked for just a moment before she quickly masked it with another scoff. "Illegal, please. The HOA can govern itself however it sees fit. You'll see. Our board stands with me." The protagonist leaned forward, unable to hold back. "Really, Karen, because last week I had 3 neighbors stop me at the dock just to apologize for you. Half the community is tired of your threats. They're scared of you, not supportive." Karen's eyes snapped to him, her glare sharp enough to pierce steel. "Lies. Nobody in this community would dare cross me." But even as she spoke, the faint tremor in her voice betrayed the truth. The Attorney General caught it too. His gaze hardened, his voice dropping into a register that left no room for argument. "You've dug yourself into a dangerous hole, Karen, and if you continue, it won't be the HOA board you'll be dealing with. It'll be me, in court." That landed. The color drained from Karen's face, but her pride wouldn't let her surrender. She grabbed her purse, turned on her heel, and stomped toward the cabin door. Before leaving, she hurled one last threat over her shoulder. "You think you've won tonight. You haven't seen what I'm capable of. This isn't over, not by a long shot." The door slammed, and the echoes rattled through the cabin like aftershocks from an earthquake. The protagonist exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment finally settling. For the first time, he felt a flicker of relief. The Attorney General was here, on his side. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare would finally end. But the Attorney General's expression remained dark, his eyes fixed on the closed door. "She won't stop here," he said quietly. "People like her never do, and when she makes her next move, it won't just be loud, it'll be dangerous." The protagonist's relief vanished. A chill slid through him deeper than the winter air outside. Because if Karen wasn't finished, then the real battle hadn't even begun. And sure enough, by the very next morning, Karen's escalation would shock the entire lake community and turn neighbor against neighbor in ways no one saw coming. The next morning dawned crisp and cold over the lake. A thin layer of fog clung to the water, the kind that made everything look quiet and untouched. But the stillness outside did not match the storm brewing within the neighborhood. The protagonist stepped onto his porch with a mug of coffee, hoping the calm view of the water might steady his thoughts after the chaos of the night before. The memory of Karen's intrusion replayed in his mind, but more than that, the Attorney General's warning echoed like a drumbeat. She won't stop here, and he was right. By the time the sun had fully risen, the first text came through. Then another and another, messages from neighbors, each one with a tone of confusion, worry, or disbelief. "Is it true you're trying to shut down the HOA? Karen says you're meeting with state officials to take over the community. She's telling everyone you want to bulldoze the lakeshore to build resorts." The protagonist's stomach sank. Karen hadn't just doubled down, she had gone nuclear. She was spreading lies, twisting the truth into something unrecognizable, and weaponizing fear to rally the neighborhood against him. By mid-morning, he saw them. Neighbors clustered on the sidewalks, whispering, pointing toward his cabin. A few looked apologetic, others uncertain, and some outright hostile. The power of rumor was already spreading like wildfire. And then, as if on cue, Karen arrived. She strutted down the street with a stack of flyers in her hand, passing them out like invitations to a party no one actually wanted. Her voice carried loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. "Protect our community," she declared, waving the papers dramatically. "He's trying to destroy our way of life. Secret meetings with politicians, plotting against the HOA. Do you want your property values to plummet? Do you want outsiders running your neighborhood? Stand with me, and we'll stop him." The protagonist couldn't believe it. He had seen Karen exaggerate, manipulate, and twist words before, but this was something else entirely. She was painting him as an enemy of the community he had only ever wanted to be part of. From across the street, a neighbor named Paul approached, holding one of Karen's flyers. He frowned, his voice uneasy. "Hey, is this true? You're really trying to dismantle the HOA?" The protagonist shook his head, firm but calm. "No, Paul, none of this is true. The Attorney General came here last night because Karen barged in uninvited. We were meeting about a state project that has nothing to do with this neighborhood. She's twisting everything to fit her agenda." Paul's eyes flickered with doubt. He wanted to believe, but Karen's voice rang louder in his ears than reason, and Karen saw the hesitation. She swooped in like a hawk, her tone cutting. "Don't believe him. He's a smooth talker, but his goal is clear. Strip away our community's power and run things his way. Are you going to let him?" The group of neighbors murmured, the tension rising. The protagonist felt the weight of the moment. If Karen won them over with fear, he would be outnumbered before he even had a chance to explain. But before he could respond, the Attorney General's car pulled into the street. Doors opened and the man himself stepped out, his presence commanding attention. Conversations fell silent, whispers hushed, and all eyes turned toward him. Karen's confident smile wavered for just a second, but she quickly recovered, planting herself firmly in front of the crowd. "Oh, how convenient. Here he is, the politician himself, come to interfere in our neighborhood. Well, we don't answer to you." The Attorney General looked at her, then at the gathered neighbors. His voice carried with quiet strength. "I'm not here to run your community. I'm here because this woman has crossed a line. Last night, she broke into private property and attempted to claim authority she does not have. I'm here to tell you the truth. Your HOA has no jurisdiction over this cabin or this man." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors exchanged stunned glances. Karen's face flushed red, but her pride refused to give way. "That's a lie," she snapped. "He's protecting him because they're working together." The Attorney General stepped forward, his tone firm. "Do you really want to stake your community's reputation on this? Because if you continue down this road, it won't be me you'll be answering to, it'll be the courts." The neighbors shifted uncomfortably. The whispers started again, but this time they weren't all in Karen's favor. Doubt was seeping into her army. Karen sensed it too, and desperation makes dangerous people unpredictable. She lifted her chin, her eyes burning with defiance. "Fine. If you won't listen now, then you'll listen after tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting, and everyone will hear the real truth." The Attorney General's expression darkened. The protagonist felt the weight of what she was threatening. Tomorrow wasn't going to be a discussion. It was going to be a spectacle. The emergency HOA meeting was set, but no one, not even the Attorney General, was prepared for the chaos that Karen was about to unleash inside that boardroom. The community center hadn't seen this much activity in years. Cars lined the streets, voices echoed in the parking lot, and neighbors filed inside, buzzing with curiosity and tension. The promise of an emergency HOA meeting had spread like wildfire, and thanks to Karen's dramatic flyers and relentless door knocking, nearly every resident had shown up. The protagonist walked through the doors with the Attorney General at his side. Conversations hushed, eyes turned, and whispers followed them like shadows. Some faces were sympathetic, others hostile, but most were confused, pulled between two opposing narratives. At the front of the room, Karen stood tall behind the podium, papers stacked before her. A self-satisfied smile plastered across her face. She had orchestrated this entire moment, and it showed. "Ladies and gentlemen of the community," she began, raising her voice just enough to echo, "we are gathered here because our neighborhood is under threat. A threat from someone who doesn't respect our values, our rules, or our peace. And that someone is sitting right there." All eyes shifted toward the protagonist. He remained calm, though his chest tightened under the weight of the stares. He knew Karen would twist the truth, but the question was, how far would she go? Karen slammed her hand down on the podium for effect. "He invited a state official into our neighborhood to undermine our HOA. He's plotting changes that could destroy our property values, disrupt our way of life, and leave us powerless. And if we don't act now, everything we've built here will be at risk." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's voice rose, sharp and theatrical. "I propose we enact an emergency bylaw, effective immediately, that allows the HOA to exercise jurisdiction over all properties connected to the lake, regardless of prior exemptions. That means no more loopholes, no more outsiders thinking they're above the rules. We take back control." Applause broke out from a handful of her loyal supporters, but the rest of the room remained uneasy. Some whispered, some frowned, and some looked to the Attorney General, who stood tall, silent, waiting. Finally he stepped forward. The room fell quiet. "Neighbors," he began, his voice steady but commanding. "What you are witnessing is not community leadership. It is an abuse of power. This woman broke into private property last night, attempted to enforce rules where she had no authority, and is now proposing retroactive laws that violate state statutes." Karen's smile faltered. "Lies, he's covering for him." But the Attorney General raised a folder high. "Here are the official county maps and jurisdictional records. This cabin is outside HOA control. Period. And if you attempt to pass retroactive rules to target a single homeowner, you will not only lose in court, you will put the entire HOA at risk of legal dissolution." A heavy silence fell. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the Attorney General's words sinking in. Karen's supporters exchanged worried glances. The board members at the front table looked pale, uncertain. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to recover. You can't scare us with legal talk. This is our community. We decide what happens here, not you." But the tide was turning. A woman from the back stood up. "Karen, enough. You've gone too far. We've all seen the way you bully people into silence. Last week you threatened to fine me for painting my mailbox, even though it's not in the bylaws." Another neighbor chimed in. "She told me I couldn't host my grandchildren overnight without HOA permission." "That's insane." Voices began to rise. Complaints, frustrations, stories of harassment that had been simmering for months. One by one, neighbors who had once stayed quiet finally spoke up. Karen's face grew red, her eyes darting frantically across the room as the walls of her control began to crumble. But just when it seemed the meeting might end with her defeat, Karen's expression shifted. Her lips curled into a smile that sent chills down the protagonist's spine. She leaned into the microphone and said, "Well, if you won't listen to me, maybe you'll listen to the evidence I've gathered. Because I have proof that our so-called neighbor has been hiding something from all of you." The room gasped. The protagonist froze. What was she about to reveal? Karen was about to play her most dangerous card yet, and the evidence she claimed to have could turn the entire room against him in an instant. Karen relished the silence. For the first time that evening, she had the room's full attention again, and she thrived on it. Slowly, with exaggerated care, she reached into her folder and pulled out a series of photographs. She held them high for everyone to see before slamming them down on the table dramatically. "Here," she declared, "photographic proof of what he's been doing at that cabin." The protagonist's heart pounded. He had no idea what she could possibly be holding. The Attorney General remained stoic, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. Karen held up the first photo, a grainy shot of the protagonist unloading boxes from his truck late at night. "Secret deliveries," she announced. "Mysterious boxes arriving after dark. What's he hiding? What's he bringing into our community without approval?" A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. She flipped to another photo, this one of the protagonist meeting with the Attorney General on the porch. From a distance, the image looked clandestine, like two men huddled in secret conversation. And here, Karen's voice rose triumphantly. "Late night meetings with politicians, right under our noses. You think this is innocent, or is it the beginning of something much bigger?" The protagonist opened his mouth to respond, but Karen cut him off, brandishing a third photo, one that made his stomach drop. It showed him and the Attorney General standing over blueprints inside the cabin. To anyone who didn't know the context, it looked like plans for construction. The room erupted, voices overlapped, questions flew. What are those plans? Is he really building something? Why would the Attorney General be involved? Karen raised her arms like a conductor orchestrating chaos. "See, he's been plotting all along. He wants to develop the lakefront, turn our peaceful neighborhood into some kind of resort or business project. And once that happens, our community will be gone." The protagonist stepped forward, his voice finally cutting through the noise. "Those photos are misleading. The boxes were supplies for cabin repairs. The meeting with the Attorney General was about a state water preservation initiative, not the HOA, and the blueprints, their restoration plans, approved by the county, to reinforce the shoreline, protect it from erosion, and preserve the natural beauty of the lake, not destroy it." But Karen pounced. "Oh, how convenient. And we're just supposed to take your word for it." The Attorney General's voice thundered through the hall. "Enough." The room went silent instantly. He stepped forward, holding up his own set of documents. "These are the official project papers, signed and stamped. This man is working with the state to preserve your lake, not destroy it. Every single thing Karen just showed you is taken out of context, designed to manipulate you into fear. And that, my friends, is the real threat to your community, not him." Neighbors looked at the documents, whispers turned to nods, doubt began to shift away from the protagonist and land squarely on Karen, but Karen wasn't finished. She slammed her fist on the podium, her face red with fury. "Lies, all lies. You're all blind if you can't see what's happening here. And if you won't fight with me, then I'll fight alone. But don't say I didn't warn you when everything falls apart." She grabbed her folder, stormed away from the podium, and pushed through the crowd. The meeting dissolved into chaos, neighbors arguing amongst themselves. The protagonist exhaled, exhausted but relieved. For the first time, it seemed like the truth was finally on his side. But the Attorney General's eyes stayed fixed on the door Karen had just stormed through. His expression was grave. "This isn't the end," he said quietly. "When people like her lose control, they don't back down, they get reckless." And true to his words, Karen's next reckless move wouldn't just threaten the protagonist, it would put the entire HOA future in jeopardy. The HOA Karen, who once strutted around like a self-proclaimed queen of the lake community, now sat red. Faced in a courtroom, her arrogance shattered. The Attorney General's testimony sealed the deal. Her intimidation tactics, false claims, and illegal harassment of homeowners were exposed in front of everyone. The judge's gavel came down hard, heavy fines, a restraining order, and immediate removal from the HOA board. The neighbors, who had lived in fear of her for years, finally exhaled with relief. As for me, I didn't just reclaim my peace at the lake cabin. I gained the respect of the entire community for standing up when no one else dared. HOA Karen thought she could barge into my life and control everything, but in the end, she walked away humiliated, her so-called power stripped away. And if you enjoyed watching this HOA Karen finally face justice, Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because more jaw-dropping HOA stories are coming your way, and you won't want to miss the next twist.